High school graduation rates for minority students in Minnesota are the lowest in the country. We're taking a look at Minnesota's achievement gap and what our community is doing to tackle this ongoing problem. I'm Rena Kamal. Our Issues Twin Cities starts now. Minneapolis is noted as one of the top cities in the U.S. In Minneapolis, you can find affordable housing, high employment, and great education, coming on top as the most literate city in the country. However, one of the most misguided facts of the Twin Cities is Minnesota has the worst achievement gap between white and minority students among the entire nation. As the executive director of MinCan, Daniel believes every child can succeed academically if given access to a great public school.
Many times when people think about the achievement gap, they think about the gap between how white students are doing and students of color are doing on exams and other metrics. But the reality is there's another gap that exists, which is how kids of color are doing in Minnesota versus kids of color around the country. And the reality is for kids of color, they do a lot worse in Minnesota than elsewhere around the country. In fact, we have the lowest graduation rate in the nation for Latino students and the second lowest for African American students and Native American students. And so why is it that Minnesota is so far behind our peers? And I think one of the big reasons is we haven't had to deal with some of the demographic shifts for a long time. So Minnesota's typically for a long time has been a homogenous society. And now we start to see an influx of immigrants and new populations, and we're just not ready and prepared to ensure that all those kids have access to a great school.
Hi, Charles W.
Mari is the principal of an academically struggling inner city school, devoting her every being to her kids and their education.
These kids, just their level of love is almost like, at times, unbearable. Their love is pretty intense. And their love for us sometimes is a lot. Their trust in us. It's a very familial environment. And we haven't arrived at all. We still definitely have room for growth, but we have made some nice gains in this building.
Lucy Laney Community School is located in North Minneapolis, one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the Twin Cities.
So we have between 600 and 700 kids that we'll serve. We'll just stand right here. This is my post. Between 600 and 700 kids that we'll serve. We have almost all of our kids are African American. Almost all of them live at or below the poverty line. We have I think the actual numbers are, last count, 98.9% of our kids lived at or below the poverty line. We're at about 90% of our kids that are African American. The remaining are Hmong, Latino, and Native. I could probably count on one hand the number of Caucasian children that we have at Lucy Laney.
Tasha is a third grade teacher at Lucy Laney. What is it like teaching at an inner city school?
The first couple years, like last year and my first year in third grade, were very challenging. Really trying to figure out the balance of being a teacher, but yet being someone that's helping guide these children in other areas of their life too. I guess we say that here at the school, or Mari says that, we play the role of, a variety of people: psychologist, mom, dad, uncle, grandma, the list is endless. And so the last thing on that list, really, after peeling back all the layers, is being a teacher.
What are the biggest challenges that face inner city school students?
Ooh, where do you even begin? The way we do school is gonna be the first challenge. We have a very kind of let the strong survive approach to education, and that's a huge challenge, just because some of my students, or even my own biological children, cannot automatically ace this little timed subtraction test that you just gave her doesn't mean that she's a failure. And she shouldn't internalize herself as one, because then that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy on everything that she does, not just in school, but in life, because school is her first opportunity to get in the world. And so please don't tell her she's a failure right away, because then she's going to be a failure every day.
I know our students are battling hunger, they're battling sleep, they're battling living with, a variety of extended family, moving from house to house or shelter to shelter. So not having them have a stable home environment really affects the way they come to school. Some students can handle it, but then we see the effects of the students that can't hold it together at school too, because they have to let it go someplace.
Along with some of the other schools in Minneapolis, Lucy Laney has met the challenges of the achievement gap. Last year, the students tested the lowest in the whole state.
Why do you think that the students tested so low?
So first of all, we've always had among the lowest in the state.
Why is that?
So No Child Left Behind, the reenactment of the Educational Act, we started really closely tracking how different student groups were faring. And since then, Lucy Laney has always been. When we analyze the data and we identify this achievement gap, right, we have always said that African American children in Minnesota that live in poverty have always been some of the lowest performing. Right down there with Native American children that live in Minnesota that live in poverty. So if you have a school that has pretty much all African American children that live in poverty, it shouldn't be that surprising that that school's test scores look like that cell group's test scores. Now, best case scenario, you walk around to some of these other schools where maybe they have multiple cell groups, right? So they have poverty, non-poverty, African American, Native American, Caucasian American, Latino American, all of the above. A lot of times what those schools will do when they cut their scores, they continue to see that African American in poverty cell group continue to be poor performing. And so when you have schools like Lucy Laney or some of the other schools in Minnesota that look like Lucy Laney, they match the scores.
Coming up on Our Issues Twin Cities, an organization that works with low-income families to lead their children to success.
In Minnesota, 62% of Black students attend high poverty schools, compared to 10% of white students.
I think there's this belief that all kids of color can't succeed, that they just face too many barriers and challenges, whether it's at home or with poverty or with homelessness, that we sort of start to think that maybe they can't succeed. And we just know that's not true. We know that when kids are given an opportunity to be successful, that they rise to that expectation. And so the first thing MinCAN works on doing is raising expectations for all kids. How can we hold every student to high standards? How can we shift that belief gap so that parents across the state and education advocates all believe deeply that every kid can succeed?
In the 2013-2014 school year, white students outscored their Black and Hispanic classmates in state math and reading tests more than 30%. In the last 5 years, the gap has only gotten worse.
What Minnesota would say is we just have really high standards. Well, those standards are not helping the achievement gap.
Sandra is the president of the North Side Achievement Zone.
What's the main mission of NAS?
This holistic wraparound partnership from 44 different organizations that have all come together, 44 nonprofits, 10 schools, included in that number, where we all agreed on one mission, that again, we'd create this culture of achievement in the geographic zone, all of our children would be successful, and that we would align all of our efforts instead of doing separate things to support the same families and partner with the same families, not fix, not be the social service, social worker to them, but to partner with them in a real egalitarian, we know you can do it kind of way. And so the whole wraparound is around the education pipeline, if it's early childhood, the K through 12 system, mentoring, college access and supports, housing, career financial pathways, health and behavioral health, that all the organizations we've all been doing this work on the north side, but we were doing it very separately, right? And I'm over here, I'm over here doing violence prevention, you're over there doing housing, you're over there doing schools. We're not talking to each other, but it's the same families, right? So the thing we're doing now is we're just talking to each other and working together, and we've agreed on one mission together, that we're going to change things for family and children in this community.
The North Side Achievement Zone, known as NAZ, is dedicated to closing the achievement gap and ending generational poverty here in North Minneapolis.
We are dealing with a real simple solution to the achievement gap. One is, and it's really an opportunity gap, as well. One, again, the gap is not about the kids, but it's about the adults of the system. And again, that includes me. It includes teachers, it includes districts and schools and things of that nature. It includes parents, and so there's a gap, quite frankly, because we as a region, and the gap is so big compared to other, and it's not just African American, it's also Latino, it's also American Indian, it's also Asian, right? We're either dead last or second to last in four-year high school graduation rates. And I think, so here's the deal, we do so well by our white students. We do.
Here in Minnesota?
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes up a gap. Right? We do so well by our white students, middle class and upper class, and we do so poorly by our low-income communities of color. I mean, that's really what it's about. And what we have to do is start calibrating. So, high expectations with high supports. You've heard of the soft bigotry of low expectations. Again, I think because this has gone on for so long, there is not an expectation that kids born in this zip code, 55411, can actually succeed, because they have so much against them, and it's like, that's rubbish.
I want to be an archaeologist.
After joining NAZ, Jalen and his brother Kayvon turned their academics around.
What motivated you to get your academics up?
Well, near the mid-year, I knew that if you had any bad grades, you were not going to go to completion. And I really wanted to go to completion, so I complete the middle school year. So I just had to start picking up my act, had to start doing better in all my other classes, and I just started working at that.
My mentors, they worked with me and pushed me into doing things better in a different way, so I can work better with other people and do things according to how I should.
He's a driven young man, he's real focused.
Ron is Jalen's mentor.
What does it mean to you to be able to mentor these students and make a difference in their lives?
Oh, this is a big passion of mine. Coming from where I came from, I had being spiritual a little bit, I asked God to put me on a platform where I can reach out to young men and just reach out to my community. So when Northside Achievement Zone went from the Promise neighborhood to NAZ, I was able to have the opportunity to join them. So I'm from North Minneapolis, so this is just right up my alley, you know what I'm saying? So it's just been it's a passion of mine to work with my community, build my community, and work with young men who one, either needs the help or just needs some extra support.
How important is this organization, NAZ, to you?
It's very important. They mean a lot. They really do. They helped me in not just school-based, but if I'm having a problem, I can always call my mentor, Ron. They help me through social problems, academic problems, basically almost any problem. So.
And perhaps one of the most unique factors about NAZ is that it is a Promise neighborhood.
Promise neighborhood is a federal designation through the Department of Education, and basically it's communities that have replicated the Harlem Children's Zone. And so if you're in implementation like we are, implementation neighborhood, because they had some planning grants out there. But if you're an implementation neighborhood, there are 12 of us around the country. The premise is that we would have great schools in the middle of our community, surrounded by strong family and community support, right? That's we make a promise to our children that they'll have those things.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities, what it will take to close the achievement gap in Minnesota. Today, there's a community-wide effort between educators, state leaders and organizations working towards a Minnesota goal of cutting the achievement gap in half by 2017.
One of Lucy Laney's strategies to battle the achievement gap is by adding 2 licensed teachers per classroom.
We don't have hundreds of years to reverse all the trends and patterns that have happened up until this time. So what can we expedite? And one of the biggest things that we started noticing is that when we put 2 teachers in the classroom at Lucy Laney, we were blowing the roof off of stuff. So the most obvious is you have 2 licensed teachers in the room. So you can do things like maybe differentiate in a different way. You've got your kids that got it the first time you said it and are ready to go. Okay, so maybe this classroom teacher, licensed classroom teacher, can take them and push them even farther. And then you've got your kids that were like, huh, what? I didn't get that, what you just said. And then you have another licensed teacher, right, that can take them and push them further.
One of us is either teaching the standards that they have to learn for 3rd grade, that they're tested on in the spring on their MCA test. And another teacher's teaching intervention math, so bridging any gaps that they had from previous years in from 1st, 2nd, and kindergarten. And then another station that we do is an independent work time, so time spent on what they're learning about the standards or about their intervention.
When you're dealing with stuff like, people are shooting when you're walking your kids to the bus, like that can actually be very disturbing. Of course, right? It affects you. And then, you've got your mama bear thing that comes in with your kids, your students, but then, maybe you're also thinking about your own safety, your own livelihood. And so now you have somebody like in that room with you that's like your pocket partner. You can vent to. It's like, they joke about it sometimes and they call it like their work spouse, but it's like their companion, somebody that they are walking this journey with.
At NAS, the organization works side by side with families before birth to college.
We get our children on a college trajectory while they're in the womb. Like that's where we start, with the parents. We have, what's really exciting for me is that we have 4 curricular offerings that are part of our Family Academy, parenting education programming. And one of our programs is called College Bound Babies. And it's for parents who have children 0 to 3. And it is a curriculum that says, okay, so we're getting your child ready for college. And the first stop on that path to college is being ready for kindergarten. Can't start early enough for that. And so parents learn all about brain development, positive discipline, the importance of talking to your child, not just reading, but talking, that your whole community, your house, it all becomes a classroom, right? Because we're born to learn. When parents graduate, the babies graduate too. Because what starts happening is and this is what happens with middle class kids, right? If you ask my children if they're going to college, they will suck their teeth and say, of course, right? It was like, okay, you eat, you sleep, you go to the bathroom, and you go to college. Like those are just like non-negotiables. So they're like, of course. That's not the same with low income children, right? And so what we're just doing is coming beside the parents who themselves were not believed in. So that's why we're saying we're trying to do something multi-generational, because where we are today, we've gotten here because of generational realities, of isolation, of structural racism.
So trying to change that.
Absolutely. And so parents learn what it takes, and the babies start believing. Your parents believe it. You have an expectation. Your community has an expectation. Well, of course I'm going to college.
We believe that there's no single solution to closing the achievement gap, but through a combination of factors, we can start to break down the barriers that are preventing all kids from being successful. So number one, we need to ensure that all kids have access to high quality early education experiences. Number two, we need to make sure that every child in kindergarten through 12th grade is learning from an excellent educator. We have to ensure that our teaching force is very high quality. Number 3, school leadership matters a lot. Principals make a huge difference. And then, last but not least, we need to hold ourselves and our school systems accountable for outcomes. And so that means looking at things like graduation rates and test scores. Those are the types of data that we can't just ignore. And so we really need to be cognizant of how our schools are doing and hold our schools accountable for kids actually succeeding.
I want to go back to the first pillar, which is starting with high quality pre-K education. How important is it for children to begin with high quality education?
We think it's absolutely critical. And of course, there's been a big debate around and big conversation around that in Minnesota. And from our perspective, this is another one of those areas where equity matters a lot. And what I mean by that is there was one proposal this year at the legislature that we provide universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds across the state of Minnesota. And as popular as that might have been, from our perspective, that meant that there might be low-income 3-year-olds or 3-year-olds from more disadvantaged backgrounds that weren't getting anything, while well-off 4-year-olds were getting state-covered pre-K. And that is not an equitable outcome. And so we've got to invest in better, high-quality early learning opportunities for our most disadvantaged students to get them on the right track. And then we have to ensure when they get into kindergarten through 12th grade that they're attending an excellent school throughout that time as well.
What is the most rewarding part of teaching at an inner city school to you?
Just the love that these kids have. They're just so giving, and even if you have a negative interaction with them, the next day they're giving you hugs and
They always get to you guys.
yes, they do. And I think that's why I've stayed here year after year, because they're just so giving of themselves and giving to others.
I can't touch every kid, but I can touch every teacher, and they can touch every kid.
As the efforts continue, so does the Roadmap of Hope for Minnesota's educators to lessen the achievement gap as each year passes by. Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Brenda Kamal. See you next time.